doing that for some time now.
Yeah.
So this came along and does it.
Okay. I feel like every 2 or 3 years, me and you have the exact same conversation, and we've had multiple of them on this podcast, right? Man, Street Fighter 2 is really hot. We should make a Street Fighter 2 clone. Yeah, it's garbage, but maybe it'll do well. Man, modern military shooters are really hot. We should make a Call of Duty clone. Yeah, it's garbage, but maybe it'll do well. Man, MMOs are really hot. Maybe we should make an MMO. Maybe, okay, yeah, but it's garbage. Yeah, but maybe this one will do really well. Man, MOBAs are really hot. Maybe we should make one. Yeah, but it's garbage. Man, Battle Royale's really hot. And in between those last two was, wow, these games as a service shooters are really hot. And that's the weirdest one because no, they aren't, and they never were. This, Anthem, and Division feel like responses to how successful everyone thought Destiny was going to be.
Okay.
Because they didn't want to be late to the party like they always are. But then Destiny was not as successful as anyone thought it was going to be, and hell no, Destiny 2 wasn't.
Okay, but before Destiny, what was your shooter?
Borderlands.
That was it.
It was it.
That was it.
And Borderlands was a weird offshoot of Diablo. And there are Diablo clones. And guess what? A bunch of Diablo clones are really, really fantastic. Torchlight is great. Path of Exile is great. Grim Dawn is apparently pretty good.
Baldur's?
No, totally different series. Okay. Totally different kind of game.
I honestly don't know if I can think of a more dead on arrival business practice, and I'm gonna say this because financially the games that were successful are not looking too good. Don't get me wrong, dead on arrival games is not unheard of, but dead on arrival MMO Lite services, especially while the MMO genre itself is still booming. And the only reason why this video got made was because two YouTubers by the name of Yang Ye and Force Gaming eventually made 2 videos on the Xbox server shutting down. It does almost piss me off the sort of short-term memory that everybody seems to have, especially when it comes to this live service model because of this fucking idea of, oh, eventually it'll be good. And I think a lot of people will be wondering why I'm not complaining about the MMO model. It's because MMO model is very much different from the live service model. You see, studios sort of looked at the MMO model and said, let me steal what practices they have, and I'm gonna mix this MMO service and use it with the free-to-play model. Don't get me wrong, even though MMOs were definitely a success back in 2004, but our mindset and the way how we played games were vastly different. So when Bungie's Destiny eventually got released back in 2014, it was this like pseudo success because unlike a traditional MMO, the only thing that it was missing was both quantity and quality. But oh wait gamer, that's coming soon, except it never did. The fact that you had to wait like 2 years for them to release essentially a new game for you to eventually start enjoying their old game was very weird to the casual gamer. Hey, but on paper, the whole live service model sounds great. It's like, yo, hey gamer, are you a single player guy? Well, here's this 8 to 12 hour main experience. More of an MMO guy? Well, then here's this MMO type grind and activities that'll hopefully keep you engaged for hundreds, if not thousands of hours. Starting to feel bored? That's alright. Here's an expansion. Rinse and repeat. But after Destiny winded up being this weird mixed bag between being a pseudo-success / pseudo-failure, and then the even bigger flop in Anthem, I believe it was time to give it up. But they're not going to, because the best way to describe this live service type of style is, well, greed machines. And then it kind of dawned me. What's happening now with live services kind of reminds me just a little bit of Blockbuster. And for those of you who do not understand what Blockbuster is, I will describe it to you right now. Blockbuster was this place, kind of like a library, where you'd go there and borrow movies, specifically VHS and DVDs. And sure, they eventually had a couple of games in their library too. That sounds a little bit familiar to what Xbox has been doing recently, right? What's the difference? I think people value video games more, obviously, more than they value kind of the old ways of watching movies and VHSs and DVDs. And remember, I said rent. Rent is just another way of saying borrow it. You would borrow it for a price, and you would keep doing it over and over and over again until eventually you can do one of two things. You could buy it from them, or you could just keep on renting it. And the truth is that the more you think about Blockbuster, the more you realize, it's almost no different from Netflix. But how did it die? Easy. It eventually just became outdated. When the times were changing, we were definitely going more digital, but Blu-ray is actually what killed it. The truth is that the moment Blu-ray entered the picture back in 2006, it wasn't an instant effect, but it was a noticeable one, especially when, like, my family eventually kind of stopped going to Blockbuster because it was just a little bit too expensive, and especially with the PS3 coming out, which was essentially another cheap-ass Blu-ray player. And the only thing we had to do was buy movies coming out on Blu-ray, especially since you were now getting this higher quality movie watching experience. And you know what's kind of funny? Back in 2014, that's when Blockbusters all around the United States was closed down. And the truth is that these live service models slash MMOs kind of continue to do something like this. Like, yo, if you keep paying us, you can keep renting this game. You could pretty much say it's the early version of a subscription model. And I know for a fact people are going to be like, well, how come they're still doing this live service? Because it generates money, god damn it. It's that simple. Your game may not need to be good. You probably have no intention of fixing it later, but so long as you be like, oh, you know, in time, it's keeping a fucker on a hook. Because initial release day sales, shit, even week sales is no longer a standard way of measuring the success of a game. I'm not gonna lie, the original point of this video was for me to sort of just shit on 343 Industry for being a very incompetent gaming studio. And they still are. And here's a little quote that I will be sharing from this previous script. Allow me to state the obvious, 343 has treated Halo almost as bad as Disney treated Star Wars. And my reasoning for that was simple. Halo 4 was actually pretty decent, but then afterwards, all the other games after that was just crap. And getting worse and worse in quality. And that was originally what the latter half of this video was supposed to be until I watched this clip from Castle Super Beast. And as it turns out, Bungie's not doing too hot to the point where they have been failing to generate revenue, and it looks like Sony will be taking over them. And this is what everybody was pretty much fearing, this idea of like, yo, what happens when it doesn't work out for you? And it's like, oh, Bungie's about to be eaten by Sony, that's why they're downsizing. The only reason why this is such a huge problem for someone like Bungie is because Destiny was really their only form of revenue. I mean, I did hear the fact that they tried their best to do comic books and like novels, but they're not Blizzard. No one's really interested in Destiny this way. And also from what I hear, the books are not that fucking good either. And you know, I remember a long time ago when it was seeing like this big, huge accomplishment where it's like, oh look, they are no longer bound by Activision and they still own their property. It was like, oh, good for you, but they didn't do anything with it. And apparently it also doesn't help that I heard through a grapevine that, apparently the marathon reboot that they're fucking doing isn't turning out so hot either. Apparently they allowed a lot of Escape from Tarkov content creators to come and test out their game. And the kicker to this story is when apparently the devs were all like, all right, show of hands, if we drop this game tonight, how many of you would want to play it? And apparently no one did. I think the truth is that you're already having an uphill battle with Marathon, because for someone like me, Marathon is just the thing that I would figure out so many years later that, oh, there's apparently a couple of Easter eggs within Halo. Like the way how I always looked at Marathon was that Marathon was always sort of this cult classic, but a cult classic literally just means that your game kind of wasn't that good, or it was more on like an underground title, which meant there were better games than it. Sure, it gets appreciated later on, but mechanically it doesn't make the game better. And also, I believe it was supposed to be like this like fast-paced shooter too, so the fact that you're looking at Escape from Tarkov players, like again, that's kind of like another niche that you're trying to go for. And one of the things that does make this a little sad is because Destiny was supposed to be seen as the successful live service game. But again, that's the thing, it's only been perceived as successful. And you know what? This sort of reminds me of the whole like live by the sword, die by the sword philosophy. And it's like, yep. And Bungie's definitely dying by the sword. And Sony is just there to eat the corpse. Man, what's happening to Bungie is so crazy because it's like, yo, these people went out of their way to try and create Destiny and, you know, they broke away from Activision. But again, this is kind of the same problem that you wind up running into in the sense of like, yo, when you have these naive tunnel vision idiots who actually believe that they're making some good shit, and then reality hits whenever they invite people outside of their little clique who's not as invested into this thing as they are, and like reality strikes and it's just like, oh my god, have we been making crap for it's like, yeah, you have. And it also doesn't help that they're downsizing because they have no other choice. That's what most companies do to try and keep themselves afloat. It's not going to be the first time, and it's not going to be the last.